Greetings, peace and love, family. Let me put my headphones in and welcome you all to the chat. Welcome you all to the room. There we go. Yes, so I just wanted to pop back in and elaborate on some things. Peace, 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 not meek official. And we're going to make sure to drop that website link in the chat. That's the seedoflightlearning.org. So tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the the fool and the tarot. We're going to talk a little bit about some things. We want to talk about my book a little bit. The title of my book is called "It's Not in the Cards," right? And so once we once we kind of recognize and realize what the cards are, that the cards are archetypes, what the cards represent, where the true energy and where the true power resides, that's when that's when you get true kind of like when you look into Ifa, right? And you talk about your Ori, your destiny, right? So this is kind of what we're going to be talking a little bit about when we're talking about the Fool. Peace, 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 JC the Goddess. Cryptocurrency was happening. So as you all come on into the chat, we're gonna be talking about some things. Um, so before I get off into our topic today, as we're waiting for a couple of more people to come up in the room, I want to talk about some things that should be talked about in the news, but unfortunately, a lot of things overshadow because of the magnitude of what's going on in the world as far as what's going on with the conflict. It affects people on a global scale. So, of course, global news is going to overshadow nationwide news because this news is not local, but this is a bit of news that really it really moved me. It really moved my spirit. And I had heard about it. I had been following the story for quite some time. And so I want to pull that up because I want to talk about that. When we talk about energy, when we talk about embodying the cards, the archetype of the cards, when we talk about embodying the archetype of spirit or the different archetypes of spirit, if we're not moved by some of the things that are going on, then I don't know what to say about us as far as our humanity is concerned, or have we been completely and totally taken over by a false reality, right? So this story is about a young she's not even a lady, she's a little girl. Let's call it for how it is, for what it is. So her name was uh Nazia Harris, right? She was a 13-year-old little girl. So here's this man, Jarvis Butts, right? So this is his Jarvis Butts, Butts, Jarvis Butts. So this was evidently in Detroit. And so this man, Jarvis Butts, had been having an inappropriate relationship with this 13-year-old. Evidently, this inappropriate relationship led to the young lady conceiving. Okay, the teenager conceiving. And so this she had been, gone missing for like over a year, since, I want to say maybe a couple of years. And he had gotten convicted. He had gotten convicted of, making sure that she's no longer walking on the planet. And 2 weeks after his sentencing, they found him in his cell. According to the stories, or according to what's being told, they found him in his cell and they are saying that he did it to himself. Now, I mean, as he should have, because evidently this wasn't the only, underaged human. There was an 8-year-old underage human, and there was another young underage family member human that he was getting ready to serve a concurrent sentence of 15 years for doing the exact same thing to them. So here are three underage human people, right? And after the three underage human people, and he gets his sentence, he decides that he wanted to take his own self, from being able to walk on the planet. And I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad. That's between him and his creator, that happened. But I think that the fact that there's so much going on in the world right now and stories like these aren't getting attention, about this happening to this young lady is really sad. It's really sad. So as we talk about the fool, as we get off into talking about the fool, I can assure you that there's if that's a fool if I ever saw one. Somebody who didn't allow, these underage human beings to fully come into their own destinies in life. An individual who their own energy of the fool turned against them, recklessness, acting reckless, acting impulsive, doing things that are going to be to the detriment of yourself or somebody else. This is a beautiful segue into what we want to talk about when we talk about the fool. So, talking about the food, it's not in the cards. Okay, it's not in the cards. This is my book. You can find it on Amazon. Okay, it's not in the cards. You can find it on Amazon. You could get it in paperback, and you can get it in the Kindle version. If you check the link in the description box, and if you check the link that my moderator has dropped in the chat, you'll be able to click that link, and then you click on books, and you'll be able to find the books. Okay. So in this book, okay, so it serves as memoir and teaching guide as to, when you look at cards, especially people that love the tarot, people that love to read tarot cards, people that put, all of their, I mean, I remember we talked about 20, 25 years ago, working for psychic hotlines and being a tarot card reader on these lines, a lot of people were addicted to it. I'm talking about addicted to tarot like they were addicted to alcohol, addicted to tarot like they are addicted to cigarettes, addicted to tarot like they are addicted to food, right? And so, as a reader, you would also have to have some amount of, hey Delia, you would also have to have some amount of integrity as it relates, because people don't know how to stop themselves when they're addicted to something. That's the literal meaning of the word, something that they cannot help, something that they cannot stop. So when you find that there are people that will take advantage of that, right? Hey Julie, you'll find people that will take advantage of that. Well, that's just a very terrible thing. Peace. So when we talk about the tarot and we talk about it's not in the cards, there's something very important that most readers and most people that receive readings need to get. These cards, especially when we talk about the 22 major arcana, and that's what my book is based on. It's my walk, my journey, my personal journey through the 22 major arcana, but also showing you, right? So, and that's the subtitle, a mystic's journey, to the altar within, right? Because you've got to recognize that none of the magic is in a card, none of the magic is in a candle, none of the magic is in anything outside of you, because it takes your energy, it takes your intention, it takes your attention, right? It takes your focus, it takes the everything that's inside of you, right? And so oftentimes when people use tools as a guide, as a director. Peace, Cherie. as a guide or as somewhere, some type of way to direct you. We're not supposed to get lost in the tools. We're not supposed to become addicted to the tools, even as readers. People every day they wake up, oh, every day I wake up, I pull my card for the day, and then it becomes such an integrated part of you that you stop learning how to trust your own intuition, you see. So let's look at the archetype of the fool, right? Let me see if I can kind of look at the camera over here. Let's look at the archetype of the fool, right? So a lot of times people kind of misunderstand and misrepresent what the fool is and what the fool actually represents. The fool is represented by, it is the literal first card in the tarot deck, and it is represented by the number 0. So you go from 0 to 21, and then there you have your 22 major arcana. The 0, when you look at that, it's a cipher, okay? It's a circle, okay, which represents 360 degrees. It represents a cosmic egg. It represents infinite possibility, right? A beginning without end, right? So to speak. Um, when you look at the embodiment of the fool, most tarot deck creators or most people that write books on tarot, they're going to tell you the upright meaning of the fool. They're going to tell you the reverse meaning of the fool. They're going to say, oh, the fool represents new possibilities, right? It represents just believing in yourself, having a very strong faith and believing in yourself, just taking that plunge. And then the reverse meaning talks about recklessness. It talks about not knowing which way to go, not knowing how to contain yourself, your whole world. You kind of also egoism too when you look at the fool reverse. Nobody wants to play the fool, but everybody plays the fool. Nobody wants to play the fool, not really. Not really, not when you're looking at the fool from a negative perspective, right? um People have a thing about wanting to be fooled in life. April Fool's Day. What is it about being a fool that has always had this negative connotation connected to it? So sometimes you might not want to say the fool. Some people might want to say, like in my deck, for example, the Sirius Codex, the fool is called the wanderer. So it's not about the fool's journey, but the fool's journey is actually a journey through every archetype in the major arcana, because every archetype in the major arcana applies to a certain aspect of the self, or particularly when you start getting up in the higher ranks of the major arcana, it starts to represent aspects of life. So we have the first part of the major arcana, which represents aspects of the self, and then you have the second part of the major arcana, which kind of represent aspects of life, right? When you're talking about the devil, you're talking about the tower, you're talking about the sun, the moon, the world, the wheel, justice, strength, all of these things. And then the first part of it is talking about your evolution as a human being, right? When you talk about a fool, you talk about your evolution or your descension from spirit, right? When you also look at the fool, and funny enough, the fool, I want to say some of the earliest artistic depictions of the fool has depicted the fool as like a gesture, a court jester, right? With the clown hat and, you looking like a clown, right? Then as artistic expression evolved, a lot of people, like I say, it just didn't kind of sit right with a lot of people. But I want to break that down from a more spiritual perspective, and I also want to break it down to an everyday life perspective, meaning what? Practical. So again, as I was saying, when we look at the word spirit, right? Spiritual, it comes from a word espirite, right? And look at espirite, spiral. spirit, spear, spiral, right? So we're talking about a circular motion, right? We're talking about a dissension. So the full, that zero, right? That cosmic egg, that cipher, that unbroken cipher, right? We're talking about a celestial body, celestial thinking, more so of the highest self, right? So this full energy descends into the crown. It descends into the crown. So we can also be talking about your ori, your destiny, because when we look at the fool, we look at the fool, and the fool has the little knapsack on its back, and it's going on a journey. And this journey, again, is taking you through all of the different aspects of self, because from the fool, then you go into the magician, and then you go into the high priestess, the hierophant, the emperor, the empress, all of these different people who you become, the hermit, all of these different people, right? And they're all talking about aspects of you and who you are and how you evolve through life. And then the fool is what? The fool could be like a newborn baby coming into this world not knowing anything, having to be taught, having to be shown, having to be guided. And such are we in the spirit realm. Many of us are like newborn babies in the spirit realm. And so therefore we come like the fool, not completely unassuming, right? Because there is a certain amount of faith. There is a certain amount of faith that comes in that says, I don't know what's out there, but I'm sure that it's something bigger than me. I don't know what's out there, but I'm determined to go and find out what it is that's going to get me on the right path, right? So the fool has a certain amount of curiosity, right? Inquisition, also just, they say, free hearted, kind of living in the id. When you talk about psychology, right? You talk about the id is the part of the brain that just wants to experience joy. It doesn't want to buckle down and get serious about nothing. It's the pleasure center, the pleasure point. So the fool is all about the pleasures of life. The fool really just wants to be happy. The fool says ignorance is bliss. And here I am, ignorant as a mug, right? So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the fool, right? Let me put my glasses on because I see some activity going on. Y'all here? Y'all with me? What's going on? Okay. So when we when we talk about when we talk about as the fool is moving along this journey, the fool is on a search for inner wisdom. It wants to know everything about his or herself. He or she wants to know everything there is to know about life. Again, just a very inquisitive, curious type of spirit. Now, how many times, and you can look at this for yourself and ask yourself the question, right? How many times have we just taken a plunge and done something? How many times have you just up and moved to a different state where you didn't know anybody at all? Right? A lot of your family members would have said that you were foolish. You were foolish for foolish. You kind of a fool, but maybe you got some sense. Who knows? Right? So, but look at it like this. How many times have you made a decision to do something kind of on an impulse? Maybe you gave it a little bit of thought. You thought about it a little bit. Maybe you didn't ponder too long. Maybe you were just going with that gut feeling. See, the fool is also about that. And there's an intuitive side of the fool. The fool kind of operates from the brain inside the gut, right? So you can look at it like that. You've done this in your own life. Each and every one of us has done something. We've made a choice. We've made a move. We've quit a job, not knowing where the next job was going to come from. We got into a relationship with somebody. And sometimes, here's the funny thing about the fool is that a lot of times people want to look at the fool as being completely unassuming. You can't look at the fool as being completely unassuming because the fool is on a journey. So the fool is always seeing what? Signs. Signs. The fool is always seeing signs along the way. right? So, how many times have you been in a situation where you saw the signs, you saw the red flags, you saw the writing on the wall, right? And you still went and moved with the gut feeling that what you wanted. Sometimes the fool may think it's operating in its heart, but most of the time it feel like it's operating in its gut. But that's when its gut is not aligned. Now, when you talk about, if you want to look at negative aspects, they say the reverse version or the reverse side of that card talks about, like I said, the impulsiveness, the being reckless, the kind of allowing that energy to turn on oneself and destroy you from within, right? Sometimes the fool can get too much knowledge, right? Did you notice somebody that gets too much knowledge is almost like a fool? Right? Because you don't allow yourself the time to process and assimilate the knowledge that you're already acquiring, but you want to keep getting more and more and more and more until you get information burnout. There is a such thing as that. So somebody that goes seeking too much knowledge also is almost like a fool. And this is just one simple example of how that energy of the fool that's always seeking, that's always looking, that's always curious and inquisitive, this is how that energy can turn reverse and how it could turn inside of you. Somebody that can have so much knowledge about health and healing and herbs and herbalism, but still won't take the steps, and I've been guilty of this as well, still won't take the steps to take care of oneself. This is having all the knowledge, but still being a fool because you won't put that practicality in motion. You won't put that knowledge to action. You won't apply it. And that's what wisdom is, right? Many of us go through that. Many of us go through that, right? So when we look at the fool's journey to know itself, it starts off saying, you know what? I know very little about this topic. I know very little about this subject. So a fool goes to school, right? A fool learns, right? And it's only until the fool has fully realized itself and fully balanced his or herself that it can move into the magician. Why is the magician? And I'm not going to get off into the magician. I might get a little bit off into the magician today, or I might save the magician for another time. But it's only until the fool has completely reconciled everything within itself that it can take that first step. And this is why the magician is represented with the number one, because the magician is actually first step from coming into nothingness, right? Just being in the ethers, being in the spirit realm and descending into physicality. When you also look at the number one and the fact that it goes straight up and down like that, that also represents kind of that heaven to earth, right? Heaven to earth. So what's happening is that the consciousness is now taking the first step into what? Into realizing that it has the tools that it needs, that all the tools are around you that you need. Remember, it's not in the cards. And this is what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about my book. It's not in the cards. And this writing is coming from someone who has been a card reader, tarot and oracle reader for over 25 years. I have made several decks to date. Many of you know that. I probably made over 20 something decks. All of them are no longer available, just only a couple. Every now and then I'll come out with something seasonal or something if spirit hits me, some sort of a guidance deck. So, for those of you that have my decks, like, hold on to them, hold on to them, cherish them, hold on to them, because I'm really not in the process of making any more. However, the reason being is because now my message is clear. My message is that although I have made many decks, I have read with many decks and different things like that, the true realization is that the cards are only a reflection of humanity, our humanity. The cards can't give you anything that you already don't know about yourself. It's not in the cards, it's in you. right? So even going into a little bit of, I don't have to go too much into the history of tarot. You all know that it was, kind of made in Sicily or Italy somewhere, and it started off as beautiful, beautiful artwork. Even right now today, there's a very old Italian man, if he's still alive, who is a very prolific artist in creating. He would be commissioned, right? So these people would be commissioned to paint these archetypes as the king. So you're talking about court cards, which is why they're called court cards. In the, let's say, in a playing deck, right? And then you go over into the tarot, it's the same thing. When you go into your playing cards, you have your hearts, you have your diamonds, you have your spades, you have your clubs, right? When you go into your tarot, you have your cups, you have your pentacles, you have your swords, you have your wands, right? So it's the same thing. It's based off of the same energy. When you want to look at it and tie everything together, it all kind of stems out of uh, um, esoteric teachings, right? But not so much in the beginning. It was started off as like a fun game with the pictures on it, and then they say that the it started off like that, and then the regular playing deck followed after that, but we don't know which one came first for real, right? But we do know that when it started off, only wealthy people had it. People would be commissioned to paint beautiful decks, for the very wealthy, and it was a fun game. It only later on turned into something that was used as a divination tool, right? Because we'll take anything. We'll read with some tea leaves. We'll read with some cowrie shells. We'll read with, just look at you and read your aura, right? Remember, it's not in the cards. It's in you. It's not in the shells. It's in you. It's not in any tool. It's in you. So even when you look at the major arcana, okay, when you look at the major arcana, you are looking at a reflection of humanity. Humanity came first, not these cards. So the Fool, again, represents you in your unawareness. You in your unawareness and your search for truth, your search for divinity, your search for who am I? What is my purpose? Now, again, on the reverse side of that is somebody who just doesn't care. They're a drifter. One of my teenagers was reading a book called Outwitting the Devil, and I believe that that's by Napoleon Hill. And in the book, he had sent me an excerpt of the book, and in the book, they were talking about drifters, people that kind of drift through life with no purpose, not really, having anything, any goal, anything that they want to do for themselves. And so that could also be like in the drifter, right? Kind of, that's what I kind of get when I hear the drifter, and kind of what the definition of a drifter is. That's the Fool in reverse, right? Just kind of, just like, even if you are aware of a purpose that you have, or a purpose that you're supposed to serve, you don't follow it, you don't hear it, you don't care about it, you don't care to follow it, you don't care to put any action or motion to it. That's the Fool in reverse. Is somebody also that knows better but won't do better. Okay, so coming into your consciousness, descending from the spirit realm into the physical. The physical. Remember that the first act of magic, when you talk about the magician, the first act of magic is taking something that is intangible and making it tangible, right? So that can be an invention, an idea, a writing, a song, something that comes from inside of you. It can't be seen, it can't be touched. You can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't do anything, right? Until you bring it outside of you, until you make it physical. Otherwise, it just exists inside of you, or in the ethers, or in your own universe. So again, you see how spirit, spirite, the spiral, right, descends, the spirit, your spirit, right, descended into physical form. That is what the Fool is on a higher vibrational understanding. It is you in your in the spirit realm before having manifested into physicality, which is the one. The one. The one is straight up and down. It represents a vertical line. Vertical line is, how we travel up and down. You go through in an elevator, it goes up and down. You know, we can also move, forward and backward and side to side. That's the beautiful thing about this dimension. We're not limited to, in the ways that we can move, right? But vertical movement represents ascension and descension, descending down or ascending upward. Hmm? Does that make sense? Let me get over here into the chat. Hey, Queen Liz. Does that make sense, everybody? So when you look at the fool, and when those of you that still choose to read your cards, you'll get to a point when, if it is your calling to help people, if it is your calling to help people spiritually, and remember, it can't be a calling that you called yourself to do. It has to be because you have to be built for that type of work. But if it is your calling, you will have to eventually, at some point, evolve into the type of individual that does not need tools, because you don't need tools. The tools make it convenient for you. What if there was never a tarot deck? What if there was never an oracle deck? What if there was never a pendulum? What if there were never any of these tools? I'm sure we, as humanity and being who we are, we'll go out there and find something, won't we? We'll find some twigs. When you go into the Druid tradition in Europe, they have something that they use called ohms, which are little sticks that they carve out of different trees and different things, which I think is a beautiful way of reading. I had a set of ohms at one time, but we'll find anything as humans if that's what we want to do with it, right? But what I'm saying is that we don't need to be dependent on these things. We don't need to be stuck on these things to the point where um you can't operate without it. You can't get through your day, or that you're putting so much emphasis. Because here's the other thing about readings, any form of divination. And even when I say divination, let me be clear. Let me be clear on something that your religions will call somebody with a gift of sight a prophet or a prophetess or a seer, right? And in the secular world or the non-religious traditions, it is somehow looked at distastefully. And I don't know whether that's because monetary attachment is coming with it. I don't know why people say, it's the same gift, coming through a different vessel. And again, but I don't, is that true? Because I've gone to churches being a young child, and they would have a visiting prophetess there, just coming in, just speaking words on random people in the audience, and then they would take up an offering for this person. So you call it an offering, you take a payment either way if you accepting money for it. Like, come on. So let's not get so fancy in our pansies that we get back into that third dimensional judging one another. Right? We don't want to get off into that, because this is not about judgment. This is about teaching and imparting wisdom, in that you don't have to. I don't judge anybody. Anybody, you can do what you want to do. Hmm. See, I've already gone through my fire, Shaka Khan. I've already gone through the fire, and learned the things that I've needed to learn. And I tried to teach during the time that I was doing a lot of heavy teaching. I tried to teach the things, as I understood them, or as I understood them to be, right? But as we grow and as we evolve, our knowledge is supposed to expand. So my knowledge expand in a way that may not resonate with many of you all because you still want to be in the third dimension flipping tarot cards. And that's fine. There's no judgment on that. But I am saying that when you have, sharpened your inner cards and your first eye, and you're ready to start operating in fourth and fifth dimension, then you'll be able to uh uh if it is your calling to impart spiritual wisdom on people, you'll be able to do that without tools. And this is the whole goal in life, is to become a spiritually sovereign being. And a spiritually sovereign being is operating in full trust that the guidance that comes from their spirit is correct. And not that the guidance from our spirit is not correct and not visible in the cards, because again, I can never badmouth the cards. I can only say that I've gotten to a place where I've evolved outside of them. I can use them if I want to, and if I don't want to, I'm gonna be just as accurate and tell you what needs to be said. And more so, I think that people find comfort in the cards because they want something that they can look at. People want validation. People don't want to take it necessarily from you. What can the card show you? What about when you're calling one of these psychic hotlines and you're not seeing them on a Zoom? You're not seeing a video. They can be telling you anything, right? These people who you don't see them, but you call them and you get these readings. They can be somebody who just started reading 2 days ago. And because you can't see them, right, what they're doing is as they're flipping cards, they're also reading. They're also reading the interpretations or the meanings of the cards directly from the book, and you think that you're dealing with somebody that's giving you some sort of an accurate reading. And look, if this is how people have to learn, but I'm just saying, don't practice on people that's paying you their money. Don't practice on people like that. Now you practice on your friends, and you practice on your family members who allow it, and different things like that. Don't practice and be charging people, because that's not integrity. You're not operating in full integrity, because you're still in a learning phase. And because you're still in a learning phase, you don't know all the different switcheroo trickaroo tactics that spirit can use to trick you up, right, when you're not really fully endowed with spiritual foresight. You don't know, because many people won't tell you when they're teaching these tarot courses. You all should have taken my class, Tea and Tarot. I might put it back up on my website. I had it on the website. I might put it back on the website. But in my class, Tea and Tarot, I also was teaching about the dark side of tarot. I was teaching about the dark side of tarot. I was teaching about how the reader's own energy can be influencing the cards. You think you reading a client, but you reading yourself. Hmm? Now, how would you know the difference if nobody ever taught you the proper way and really kind of broke it down? Because when a lot of these people are teaching about tarot, they're teaching it from a fluff point of view. They're teaching it from a trying to convince you point of view. But I don't have anything to gain. I don't have anything to convince you of. And I'm telling you that there is a dark side of it. And I'm telling you that there are ways that you, as the reader, can influence it. This is why I don't necessarily recommend people doing very serious emotional readings for themselves, because your emotions, that's right, your emotions are very powerful, and they can be influencing the outcome. This is why it's almost always better to have a stranger read you, somebody that doesn't know you or have any type of emotional connection to you, in order to be able to give you um, a fully accurate reading. And that doesn't mean that people who know you can't give you a fully accurate reading, but their emotions, right? Say you're getting a love reading, right? Say you're getting a love reading, and you're getting a love reading from your cousin, or you're getting a love reading from your sister, and your sister knows that you're in a maybe an abusive relationship, or that cousin knows that you're in an abusive relationship, and they're pulling cards, and the first time they pull the cards, the lover in the reverse position. Yep, I told you he wasn't right. I told you you need to leave this relationship. So you have to be careful. So there are dangers in not having your emotions fully intact when doing readings for yourself and other people. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? If you're just joining us, welcome. We're talking about the fool. We're talking about it's not in the cards. We're talking about the tarot. We talked about the fool, right? We talked about how the fool archetype is misunderstood. The fool is actually uh, your soul on a journey to know itself. You move into physicality from the spirit realm, which is the zero, the fool, the unawareness of yourself. And then you descend into the physical form. And then once your mother gives birth to you, and many of us are aware of ourselves in the womb, they take these ultrasound pictures of the babies inside of the womb and the baby sucking his thumb and laughing and responding to music and different things like that. So from the time that that spirit has taken a physical form, now you have moved into being the magician. You are a living magician. You are born magic. You are born a magician because you were at once intangible. And then once you took the physical form, that's the first step in this journey called life. This is why the magician is represented by the number one, because it is the first step on this journey called life. Right? Then you move through, what they call the magician, right? Being able to make use of the tools around you. Oh, I'm a baby. I'm a brand new baby. I got a hand. This is a tool. You do know that your hands are tools, right? So, oh, I got a hand. What can I do? Oh, I can pick up a Cheerio off my high chair table and I could put that in my mouth. Oh my goodness. You see what I'm saying? That awareness of the self and being able to make use of the tools around you. Being able to build exponentially on knowledge. Now that you are in the physical form, because the entire time that you were in spirit form and the entire time you were in the ethers, you were the fool. But again, the fool, I don't really like that word. The wanderer, the traveler, the seeker, and different things like that. So you existed there, right? Unaware of what it felt like to be in physical form. So you say, you know what? I want to take on a body. I want to take the first step into knowing what it feels to be human, right? Because remember, you're a spiritual being having a human experience. So as you were unaware of what it felt like to be human, you were still in complete awareness, right? In the spirit realm. Because the fool traveling also represents your ori, your destiny, following it out step by step, right? Walking this thing out. So now you move into physicality, you take that first step, you become the magician, you start making things around you. Then now, what do? You move into, oh wow, now I'm the magician. Now I gotta start coming into the higher mind, the intuitive side of things. And we'll go a little bit further along. I don't want to overwhelm your minds tonight. I want to break this down bit by bit. Again, we're talking about my book. It's not in the cards. You could click the link in the description, and you can also click the link in the chat. You could scroll up, and our moderator posted a seatoflightlearning.org. You can go to our website, and then you could click books, and then you'll be taken directly to the Amazon link. And you can get your Kindle version, or you can get your paperback version. I may I may do a giveaway, and I'll announce that. I may do a giveaway, and I'll announce that. So really quick, I also want to show you a couple of other books that I have in my repertoire. So this is a 4-book series. And so the title of the series is We Are Not What Broke Us. We Are Not What Broke Us. And so it's a social healing series. You can also find these on Amazon. If you click on that Amazon page and you click on my author name, you'll be taken to other books that I've written. And so I just want to show you the titles. The first book in the series is called I Can't Find God. I Can't Find God. And so I Can't Find God talks about how we're always on a journey looking for God outside of ourselves, looking in different religions, right? And not realizing that, God is within you, So it's really good. It's a little thin book. You can get through it in a day, you take some time, you get through it in a day. Um, let me see. Yeah, the comfort of spiritual some of the chapters in this one are when God becomes a place instead of a practice. So that's a good one. The next one is the comfort of spiritual identity. I just talked about that in my video from yesterday, how I literally built my whole identity around my spiritual path, which is something that we should never do. Here, searching everywhere for God while avoiding accountability, right? So we can't find God. That is book one. Where's that book two? Yeah, it's volume one. So this is volume one. I can't find God. Volume two is My Mind is Gone. This is kind of a comical one right here. My mind is gone, right? My mind is gone, right? This one is a comical one because it's serious, but it's comical. And in this one, I'm talking about the social media craze, how everybody, some of the wickedest things that goes on in social media and how it's completely ruined our minds. Yes, adult minds, young minds, is ruined people's minds, from people chastising their children on social media for looks, exploiting the elders, for looks, which I think is utterly disgusting, pulling pranks on your old grandmamas and them and scaring them and making them, and then you can feel stupid if you make them have a heart attack and different things like that. So it's serious, but it's comical at the same time because I literally say my mind is gone. And what I'm talking about is the deterioration of our consciousness, because all we do is sit and scroll, and how literally our brain cells begin to die. Like we don't even create new brain cells anymore because we so caught up, right? The next one in the series, again, this is a 4-book series. The series is called We Are Not What Broke Us. It is a social healing series. I wrote these books thinking about the people. What can I leave to people when I decide that I am really done with social media for good? What can I leave as something that people can go back to, that they can get something that is tangible? This is an act of magic like no other. You're taking your words, you're taking your thoughts, you're taking your feelings, and you are putting them in script form. So the third book in the series is called Brother, I See the God in You. Now, this should be self-explanatory what this is about, because we love to tear down the men every day, all day. We could cast stones, we can throw daggers, we can hit them with bows and arrows with bows and different things like that. But there's some things that the black man needs to know about himself. He needs to be reminded, of his goodness, of his greatness, right? And so this book is the third one in the series, and it is called Brother, I See the God in You. Again, you can get all of these on Amazon, including individually. Like the Kindle versions, I think are like $9.99 for my memoir, and like maybe even like $6 or $7, I'm not sure, for these the social series. And then the last one in this social healing series, We Are Not What Broke Us, is called Don't Call Me Baby Mama. Don't call me baby mama. Please don't call me baby mama. Don't call me baby mama, right? Why did I say don't call me baby mama? Because we as the melanated woman, we get comfortable with these terms, baby mama. Why is it that we are comfortable with being a baby mama and not a wife? My BM. I thought they was talking about bowel movement the first time I heard somebody say my BM. I was like, oh, you had a bowel movement? What did you talk about that on the Bible? Hear about that? And so we get very comfortable with these terms, and there are frequencies with a title. Don't you get that? Don't call me baby mama, because it puts me in a category to, your child is 34, 30 something years old, and you still talking about that's your baby mama. That ain't no baby, and I think if we begin to start changing our vocabulary back to something that makes sense instead of all this unalive stuff and all this old crap like this, but if we start putting more intention, let me not say change, let me say If it needs to change, then change it according to what resonates with you and what you feel will work for you. But remember that words are power. Words are power. And if we put intention behind our words and the titles that we use and the names that we call each other and the names that we call ourselves, if we put a certain amount of intention in that, words have power. Words shape our reality. Words shape a name, shape who you become. Right. And so I want you sisters to recognize that it's more about being a baby mama. Like if you could be a baby mama, you could be a wife. And we live in a society now that, even women talk about how they don't want to be married. They want to be single. And I mean, good for you. Good for you. Not me. Not me. In this world, in this day and age, please, you know. Um, But again, it's a 4-book series and it is called We Are Not What Broke Us. I think you will find some good stuff there. And of course, my memoir, The Reason for the Season, is called It's Not in the Cards. It's not in the cards. All right. So I want to share that with you. I want to talk a little bit about the Fool. I think next time I come on, I'll talk a little bit about um I'll talk a little bit about the Magician. I think I'll go into a few of them. I'll try to kind of speed walk it. I'm not going to get up here and do 22 different videos, but I'll speed walk it a little bit and maybe just kind of walk you through. Maybe I'll read an excerpt from the book. I started to read an excerpt from the book this evening, but I don't have my lighting in here correct, and so I can't see. But you can also get the book yourself. And so for those of you that have already purchased your copies of my book, I want to thank you for your support. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that it brings you a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom. All right, family, I'm going to step aside and let you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for sitting down around the campfire with me. And I hope the next time that we can actually get into something even deeper. All right, y'all, take good care of yourselves. Until next time, peace.